Ba weep grana weep ninny bong. Yeah, that's a real line said multiple times in this movie. Oh boy. So, time for a Patreon-sponsored review, and this one, I gave fair warning when I was asked to do this one, and I'll give you folks fair warning as well, because I'm about to talk about the Transformers, the movie, the animated one from the 80s, and I'm going to be approaching this as almost a total outsider. I know what the Transformers are. I'm aware. I grew up in the 80s. It was hard not to know. But Transformers and G.I. Joe are semi-blind spots for me because, like, I know of them and I knew their basic deal and some of the big-name characters, but I never watched either show. I never had the toys for either one. I was He-Man, Real Ghostbusters, and Thundercats. That was my poison back in the 80s. So the only piece of Transformers media I've ever actually taken in is the first live-action film. I have not seen any of the other live-action films because when they started coming out and everyone said, well, man, the first one's the best, my thought was, I didn't even really like the first one that much. And if that's as good as it gets, yeah, I'll just check out. Now, I'm well aware that live action is not considered by most fans to be representative of the property. So, like, I'm not going to hold any of that against it. But just realize that I'm coming in with basically a little bit of osmosis knowledge. I couldn't name most of the characters in this. Well, I definitely couldn't name most of them before I watched the thing. Now, having finished it, I probably still couldn't name most of the characters in it. So, you know, this is not a fan perspective. This is somebody with no nostalgia for this property. So if you have nostalgia for it, if you grew up on this the way I grew up on something like the Rankin Bass Hobbit, and you have an absolute love for it, terrific. I'm not coming at it from that perspective, so realize that before I get started. I'm not going to be as cool as you might think I would be based off that intro, though, because there's actually a lot of fairly impressive stuff going on here. So especially in terms of the design work, Unicron especially, like the front end and like the inner workings of Unicron when it devours that planet, it's actually surprisingly elaborate and kind of horrifying. And well, speaking of horrifying, the body count on this thing, like, I knew that Optimus Prime died, and I knew that like a decent number of other characters were killed off because the film's kind of notorious for that. If for some reason you don't know, and I'm going to be talking plot pretty much the whole way through, so not really a review to watch if you don't want spoilers or for some reason haven't seen it yet. But like going in, the mandate for the filmmakers was to kill off a huge chunk of the cast so that they could push the new characters, i.e. the new toys coming out. So there was a surprisingly high body count on this, and the thing was, like, detailed, like not leaving a lot of room. So like the first few Autobots start getting dropped, and I'm like, oh, okay. Then like the third one, he gets shot, and like it specifically zooms into his face. You see the light go out of his eyes and smoke come out of his mouth. I'm like, oh, wow, okay. And a little bit later, like an Insecticon gets its head crushed under a wheel, and later on there's some Transformers getting melted in acid, and I'm like, ha! And the thing was, I couldn't tell you the names of most of these characters that died, but I know that they had them. I know these were named characters in the TV show up to that point. So the way that I can think about it is, it's like if the very first Star Wars movie, and that fight in the hallway when the stormtroopers come through and they're gunning down the rebels, you know, before Darth Vader gets his first big entrance in A New Hope. Imagine if prior to the release of Star Wars, there had been a TV show that had been running for about a year where those characters, those that just get gunned down into the hallway, had names and backstories and histories, and people have been following them and love them, and they're just, huh? This, I mean, it's ballsy. I'll give it that. The animation actually looked pretty good too. I mean, you have to kind of judge on a sliding scale for anything that isn't Disney or Don Bluth when you're talking 80s animation, but it's pretty good. And again, the design work does a lot of the legwork. The actual movement, not the smoothest stuff in the world, but they get away with it pretty well, largely for the inventiveness of what's going on and what's being shown. And the plot as it moves, like I was surprisingly engaged, certainly through the first act. As it moves along, it started to lose me, because it's one of those situations where after the first act, everybody's goal becomes clear, and then it just becomes a matter of stalling everybody. So Megatron effectively is critically wounded in his fight with Optimus Prime, a fight that Optimus Prime ends up dying from. Megatron then ends up hooking up with Unicron, who reforms him into Galvatron, which is a little bit of a shame because they have Leonard Nimoy come in to do the voice. And, you know, the voice work from the regular cast, some of the voices are annoying, which is par for the course with 80s cartoons, but you know, they know what they're doing, and they know how to deal with this dialogue, and you can kind of tell Leonard Nimoy's there to pick up a paycheck, like even more so than Orson Welles as Unicron. So, like, that's a shame considering how kind of, you know, invested the Megatron performance was. But anyway, so like Galvatron has a mission to destroy the Matrix of Leadership, and he keeps thinking he's done that. And then going back to Unicron, and he's like, no, you didn't. Then he gets sent back out again. And, you know, the hero characters, they have this place that they plan to go, and they get broken off and splintered off. And, well, now they have to deal with this. They have to deal with this. Their goal never changes. They just get delayed on the way there. So and in ways that aren't, like, particularly organic. Although not in uninteresting ways, because we get divergences like the junk planet and the really weird sort of court thing that some of them get stuck in. Some of the other weirdness, though, the song use. I mean, first of all, the songs on this, they are super 80s. Holy cow. And one of the weird things about the song use is they almost always use nearly an entire song every time they use one, which doesn't sound weird, but really stop and think about it. When you are used to hearing a song get played in a movie, it's like maybe a verse in the chorus. Like usually that, like even in the 80s where they were belting these themes written especially for the movies thing, you still usually only get a little bit of the thing at a given time. Whereas here they just let it keep playing even as the mood of the scene shifts. And that can result in some tonally odd stuff where, you know, okay, so it's fine that Optimus Prime shows up and, you know, in his triumphant leap into battle with that whole "you got the touch" and, you know, all that, but the fact that it keeps playing that song while he's in his battle to the death and taking what will ultimately prove to be mortal damage from Megatron, yeah, that's a little odd, but they keep playing because the song's not done yet. That's really weird when they use Weird Al's "Dare to Be Stupid," which I have to wonder if, like, somebody in the directing or editing or some part of this, like, just had like a staring at themselves in the mirror moment and ended up using that song, because the point at which, at the very end, where it just kind of repeats "Dare to Be Stupid," it's after, I think, like the third recurrence of the universal greeting, that thing that I said at the opening, and right after it you have Weird Al going "Dare to Be Stupid." I'm like, the movie just dared to be very stupid. It's so weird. I mean, this movie's really bizarre at points. Yet, it is engaging, and it's not dull. It's not dull, it's not boring, and I'm not even sure I could call it bad. It is just weird. There are some annoying characters. I think Daniel, the kid, is completely unnecessary and also irritating because he almost never he helps like once towards the very end, and in a way that was not that, you know, any other character could have also helped in, so it didn't have to be him. And then, in addition to that, you know, you've got Hot Rod, who's kind of irritating. Not a big fan of him either. But, you know, you've just got a couple of irritating characters like that. I mean, the big thing with Daniel for me is, like, we're in the middle of the climax and he trips and falls. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Leave the kid behind. So... but there isn't too much of that. I find the Dinobots a little bit annoying with the whole sort of Cookie Monster speak that they've got going on. I'm not a huge fan of that, but I do like I said, I like a lot of the design work, and I like a lot of the environments. There's a lot of creativity going on in this. I do have a couple of general questions, though. I'm not like actually I'm not trying to like highlight these as plot holes, but these were thoughts that actually occurred to me as I was watching it. So the first is, like, we go to several different planets and we're always encountering Transformers of some kind. Is Earth a fluke? Is all the other sentient life in the universe machine-based? Is only Earth organic life? Because you'd think if the Transformers like only came from Cybertron, that when they go to other planets, they'd be running into aliens. But they don't. They only ever run into Transformers if they're anywhere other than Earth. Are Transformers that prolifically spread out, or is robotic life the standard? That was just sort of that one didn't bug me too much. The one that did actually kind of bug me a little bit. What's the line where a Transformer can't be repaired anymore? Because there's a couple of characters, because Optimus Prime dies at about a third of the way in to this movie. At the climax of Act 1. Optimus Prime, the most popular character, the leader of the good guys, he dies. And later on, you have what appear to be much more damaged characters, like the character of Cup, and then especially Ultra Magnus, who literally gets blown to pieces and then gets put back together later. I'm like, that looked... If Optimus Prime couldn't bounce back from his injuries, but you got literally blown into multiple pieces and you got to be reassembled, how does that work? So that did actually kind of take me out a little bit when they reassembled Ultra Magnus, because I'm going, wait a minute. Given all the characters who did die, who looked like they suffered much more repairable damage than what he did. I don't think I have too much more to add. Like, I was kind of afraid of this. I was kind of afraid that watching this was going to be like, oh God, is this just going to be a painful slog through other people's nostalgia? No, like, while it by no means was this ever going to connect with me the way it would have with anyone who watched it when they were young, or anyone, who grew up on the Transformers as a property. But I can look at this and go, I see why people would be into this. I could see how, if I had been introduced to this at the right age, I could have been into this. Like, I get it. I get the appeal of this. And I think that says a lot right there. Because, oftentimes with these things, you look back on them if you were never there in the moment, and you're going, how was that a thing? I can watch this and go, no, I get it. I get the appeal of this. I get why this was a thing. It's still a little bit too weird and haphazard for my taste, but I am glad that I saw it. So thanks for Patreon, the Patreon sponsor who kicked this my way. So, yeah. That'll wrap up for this particular one. The Transformers, the movie. Have you seen it? What do you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. A whole bunch of things you can do. There's buttons and there's links. I mentioned the Patreon already. I won't mention it again. There's other links as well. Don't want to check any of it out? Don't worry about it, because at the end of the day, folks, you're the council. I just run the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.